I'm Dr. Greg Ellis. People who know me know I eat a heavily meat-based diet, and obviously meat does not come associated with dietary fiber. Now, dietary fiber is important to people, loved by people, much as mom and apple pie. They really believe it's necessary. And I've been doing a low-carb diet since the late 1980s, so my fiber intake is pretty much nil. I just don't get any. Now, do I have problems because of that? No, I don't. I think there's a lot of problems associated with fiber. The fiber will absorb water, it will swell, which will cause your intestinal tract to distend and get bigger, and then this puts pressure on your nerves, which then tend to cause muscle contractions. And this, of course, is the reason why people like their fiber, because this increases their time to get rid of the matter in their bowels. Now, about 50% of your bowel movement is made up of dying bacteria, which have come from the lining of your intestinal tract. And they form a lot of the bulk of the bowel movement. And dietary fiber will represent some of the other parts of it, but I don't see a necessity for dietary fiber, although everybody argues about its great value. And what we're seeing, what I'm trying to teach here, is that everything I'm looking at implicates glucose as the cause of all kinds of problems. So obviously, if you're going to start decreasing your exposure to glucose, you're going to decrease your exposure to fruits and grains and many vegetable matters, because they contain a lot of carbohydrate that digests and becomes glucose. Don't want glucose floating around. It's bad news. So now, Paleolithic man lived largely on meat. Some are trying to suggest today, with the popularity of the Paleolithic diets, that they had a lot of vegetable matter in their diets. There weren't vegetables around. There weren't seeds around. Particularly in many of the cold climates, there was nothing growing. They were just killing the meat and eating it. And you get the Meizai warriors in Africa who live on meat and milk and blood. They certainly aren't getting much fiber. And it doesn't seem to impact on their health in any way. And we, living in these climates, really did not get much fiber until the advent of agriculture, but we didn't have access to a lot of foods until, particularly up here in the north, until trucks started bringing grown foods in from Florida back in the 1920s. So the diet would not have been very high in fiber intake. And I think people have done quite well without a high fiber intake. I think the fiber actually irritates the intestinal tract. And my basic rule is, why would you eat something you cannot digest? And we can't digest fiber. We don't have the enzymes to digest the cellulose, which makes up the cell wall of fiber. We just don't have it at all. It's not a matter of it just isn't working well. We don't have the enzymes, so we can't digest the cellulose. So that forms the bulk of the fiber we get. And of course, many health experts recommend a high intake of fiber, 25 grams or more a day. And they bloat me. Now, what can eat fiber? Bacteria. So all the bacteria in your intestinal tract will work on eating your fiber and digesting it, and that forms byproducts and causes gas. And one of the byproducts is, because bacteria can't use oxygen to produce their energy, they ferment their food. So they ferment their food to alcohol. So I see fiber as a detriment. A lot of people will hang me in effigy for that statement, but that's my take on it, and I don't feel any suffering as a result of having a very low fiber intake now for at least the last 20 years. So that's my take on fiber, and people are surprised, and they try and get more fiber, particularly when they shift to a low-carb diet. I think the best thing to do is shift to a low-carb diet, do it sensibly, and reduce your exposure to glucose. Glucose is deadly. And I'm going to keep beating on this point until we get it out there and people realize it. As I said, I've seen a lot of people commenting on my videos about how they feel it's important to eat vegetables and to have grains and fruit. And I think this is just downright crazy because your exposure to glucose is going to be so high. So that's Dr. Ellis's take on fiber.